Thank you for all joining us today. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sean Delaney from Iasta, and also introducing you Michael Van Kolen from VF Corporation. VF Corporation have been with us as a client for something like 6 years, and they've evolved from being a tactical sourcing organisation into a more strategic organisation. We thought the journey would be interesting to talk about. And also really the differences between what happens necessarily in the US, and we're a US company, but the way we approach the European market is reflective of each individual market, and I think Michael's going to touch on that throughout the presentation. So really talking about support and adoption as well. And then finally we'll finish off on what the next stage is for the marketplace, the way we see it and the way VF and our other clients are asking us to evolve, moving towards solving more procurement business problems, moving into BI and business information and management information, and that's kind of our future growth area, and VF have got some interesting takes on that. So I just want to introduce you to Michael, and I'll leave it from here on with Michael.
Thanks, Sean. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is on the first slide. Just going to walk you through what the content is of today. We're just going to touch a little bit on the company that I work for, or we work for. Talk a little bit about procurement, then dive into how we went from adoption, or from implementation to adoption. That's been a really exciting journey for us, and I'll try to explain how we did that and talk about our successes and some of our challenges. We all have them. We will then go into some of our future plans. Where are we now? Where are we going? And touch on some conclusions, and there will be some Q&A possibilities as well. So VF, who are we? Nobody has ever probably heard of VF. Maybe some of you went to the website. But I'm sure if you look at some of these brands, then I guess everybody will have something in their wardrobes that is coming from one of our brands. So this is who we are. Just really high level. We are a U.S. public company. Our head office is in Greensboro, North Carolina. We are the largest apparel company in the world. Our annual turnover is in excess of $10 billion. We have 150 countries where we operate. We have more than 50,000 employees, and that's just at very high level. Just to talk a little bit about procurement, like where were we when we started? We started in January of 2010, so that's a little over 2.5 years ago. We had very limited leverage across all of our brands. Most of these brands came through acquisition, so they brought with them the supply chain. They brought with them their culture and the way they were buying, etc. So there was not a lot of that. We currently have $120 million on the management. The total that is up for grabs is probably double that number. So we still have some ways to go. Now this is a very interesting slide. This actually shows you where we were when we started here on the left side, and how we transitioned from being a very decentralized, very action-driven, very short-term, not really thinking long-term strategy, etc. Very, no real methodology in terms of how do we go out and communicate with our suppliers. So we've gone from that journey where it was very short-term focused, decentralized, to a much more strategic, long-term operation. So how do we do that? We obviously then partnered with Iasta. They've given us the tools in terms of eSourcing, standardization of RFPs, RFIs, supplier qualification, all of those kinds of things. This is a slide that actually comes from Gartner, but it actually does give you a really good snapshot in terms of where were we and where would we like to go. Very much here on the left-hand side is where we started, so very reactive, very much more order take driven, not thinking strategically which suppliers do I need to pick, what kind of relationship, what kind of contracts, what's the strategic importance. Much more to the right-hand side of the slide is where you would become much more strategic, much more long-term vision. If you look at where we are today, We are not yet on the right-hand side. That's, of course, where we aspire to be. We're probably more on the collaborator right now. So we do have subject matter expertise. We do know what we're doing. We do know why we have certain suppliers, but we're not yet at the far right of the slide. Then dive into the critical success factors. And then this is where we're going to talk about implementation, adoption, and what kind of KPIs have we established in order to track our success. So we have the implementation first, obviously. It took us roughly 3 months to implement eSourcing, which is, I'm not sure if that's fast or not. I don't really have a lot of comparisons, but I think 3 months was quite a good exercise. How do we do it? Important, of course, is that you start to decide, okay, who is my audience? Who needs to work with the tool? What kind of access do they need to have? You know, set up subdomain is important, that you have your own area of sourcing. RFX, set up the templates. Which templates are you going to use? Really try to standardize that. Don't turn it into rocket science, because it's not. And then we went live. In three months we went live. We started to go out, source, and start to do the first categories. If you then look at adoption, in terms of what is important there is don't just focus on the go live date. Don't just think, all right, I got the tool, it's implemented, I've set it up, I got the users. That's not just it, right? I mean, the implementation is one thing, and I'll dive into more on adoption in a minute. So when it comes to adoption, we kind of identified 3 important stakeholders, or 3 important pieces of the puzzle. You got the buyers, you got the suppliers, and you got your stakeholders internally. And I'm going to touch on each and every one of those. When it comes to the buyer side, obviously with any kind of implementation you do, senior management support is critical with anything you do if you want to really make it strategic. But that does not mean that you're done. It doesn't mean that because the senior management says, yes, this is important, that you then go, all right, I'm done, and I can go home. Creating a center of excellence is another very important piece of the puzzle. You need to make sure that you know how the tool works, that you are like a super user, or at least that you know how the tool operates. Yeah, I don't really necessarily want to go into all of these individuals, but shared success is another one. Talk about, okay, we started off with the easy categories, office supplies. It's a standard that's probably the first one that everybody starts with. Very easy, not brand intrusive. Nobody is going to set up any barriers when it comes to that. Share that success, and then from that start to go into more complicated categories that we have sourced, like retail lighting or shopping bags. That is very much to the core of the brands, and that's how we did that. On the supplier side, and I honestly think, speaking with many other people in our profession, I think this is something that we very much underestimate. There is still quite some resistance on the supplier side to participate in sourcing events. So what you have to do, you have to make sure they understand what is in it for them. Make sure they understand it's not just all about price. We do use other metrics in the Smart Source portal. Decision optimization is one of them. We do use meta bidding, which is quantifying potential differences between certain suppliers to, for example, with regards to references they have, or the experience, or the credibility they have, etc. So explain to the supplier. That will allow them to participate in they will be much more comfortable with that. Stakeholder adoption is, of course, important as well when it comes to the strategicness of your sourcing. Don't just focus on savings. If that's what you're doing, then you will very often lose some of your key stakeholders, because that's not necessarily what everybody's looking for. So don't just focus on that. It's typically the outcome, but that should not be the going-in position to begin with. Over-communicate results. Keep on explaining to the organization how the sourcing portal helps us make the right buying decision. Very, very important. Then I can share with you some of the KPIs that we have within the company. What do we track? How do we measure our success? It's one thing to implement and then to create that adoption, but what kind of KPIs do we have? Now, I've tried to list them out from tactical to strategic. Depends on what kind of company you work for and what kind of industry you're in. When it comes to tactical, we believe it's more about how many projects do you run? How many FTEs do you need for sourcing events, for example? All the way down to the more tactical side is when you start talking about percentage savings. That is much more strategic. Global reach, you know, where are we? How can we expand the usage of the tool? Then successes and challenges. I wanted to share with you some of the things that have gone really well, but obviously, as with any company, we do have our challenges. Successes are that we are a strategic business partner. The best example I can give you on that is when we acquired Timberland Q3 last year. Before the acquisition was actually made, procurement was at the table to start identifying synergy opportunities in the new reality. So we were really at the seat with the CEO, with the CFO, with all the key senior people to really start identifying, okay, what does it bring to the table when we acquire Timberland, and what kind of synergies opportunities do we have? That was a really good example for that. We have limited resistance. I think the things we've done really well is communication, but also go into the more complicated categories that initially maybe people thought are not really up for grabs. Again, like having one single supplier for retail lighting across all of our brands. I'm not sure if there are retailers in this audience, but if you would have multiple business units or multiple brands in order to do that, that is quite a good success. And we are now rolling out the tool in Asia. So we started in the US, as Sean was mentioning earlier. We implemented in Europe 2.5 years ago, and now we're moving into Asia. So that is another good success story to share. The challenges has really been all about involving all the brands. We have a lot of internal customers. Each brand will have a marketing director. Each brand has a retail person. Each brand will have, so there's a lot of people you need to kind of take with you on the journey. We also still lack subject matter expertise at the buyer level. If you look at how we are structured real quickly, is we are more a facilitator, if you will, but the ultimate buying decision will remain within the brand. So in other words, I will never be able to force a decision. Of course, it's sometimes a little bit of give and take, but we have a lot of buyers in the company. Adoption metrics. So where are we today? Our average savings when it comes to year on year, and this excludes any cost avoidance, if you will, is roughly 20%. Some of them have been more successful, some of them have been less, but on average we're at around about a 20%. We've done more than 25 tenders in the eSourcing portal so far, and they really go from office supplies all the way down to corrugated, and we've done many different categories. If anybody here is in retail and wants me to share that, then I'd be happy to do that after the presentation. Our average sourcing cycle is roughly 8 to 10 weeks. In the beginning it was a little bit longer, roughly with 8 to 10 weeks, all the way from RFI, supply qualification, all the way down to contract awarding, roughly 8 to 10 weeks. We have quite some spent on the management. The eSourcing tool is embedded within the organization. Like I just said, we are considered to be a strategic business partner to everyone in the organization. And global adoption. I just talked about that. We have it in Europe, we have it in the US, and we're moving into Asia. Future plans. So what are we going to do? We will continue to drive for innovation. Innovation is a very, very important topic within VF. And we, of course, as procurement, need to be on that same boat. So we will continue to look what's out there in the market, what tools are available, what tools does Iasta bring to the table, and I'll share a little bit on that in the next slide. Be proactive. Don't sit in your silo. Don't constantly communicate with the business. Where are we going? Where is our strategy? Where are the growth areas? What does that mean for our supply base? Do we have any risk? If we have any risk, try to mitigate that or try to come up with alternatives. Maximizing the leverage opportunity with Timberland. I just mentioned that. Timberland is roughly a $2 billion sales organization globally. If you look at Europe, that is of course a little less than that, but a lot of opportunities for us. So very exciting time. Continuously to expand our strategic partnership. We still have some areas in the business where we are not necessarily considered strategic. The best example, and this will resonate with everyone in the room, is the marketing department. That is always the biggest challenge. It's always, the best thing I do is I walk in and I say, how would you like me to increase your budget with 20%? And then they will listen. If you come in there and say, let's cut costs, or let's take out money out of your budget, or let's save money, they will say, I'm not going to do that. So it's just a way, how do you deliver that message? And we've had successes, but we still have some ways to go there. I think the next slide, implementation of e-procurement. We do not have e-procurement. We will get that. The question is when, but that is another big initiative for us. This is actually what I was just saying. If you talk about innovation, and Sean, feel free to chip in if you want, but this is something that we will be looking for. Dashboards, easy accessible information. We have spend analytics, we've got the sourcing portal, so we have a lot of information at our fingertips. But then how do you make that relevant? How do you make that exciting, and how can you do that? This is just an example of some of the things that I know Iasta is working on and is developing. I'm sure Sean would be more than happy to add to this, but do you want to add anything on this, Sean? Or?
Yeah, I mean, this is the future of the way we see our market going. The move into the business information and management information, linking the dots in the supply chain. So there are various touch points in the supply chain we've noticed, and what we want to do is link them up and make a 360 view of what's happening with each supplier, so we can see what we're spending with high and low risk suppliers, and even more importantly, what we're just about to spend through the sourcing cycle, how many contracts we've got with that particular supplier, how many we haven't. So really, we've got this information in various places. Some of us more so than others, in some areas more so than others. It's just linking this up, and this is what we think we're doing with VF, but we're also moving towards more of a communication exercise, because one of the things with the financial side of the business, one of the things that we find typically with lots of organisations is the link between procurement and finance is disjointed. There's a gap, and so and what's interesting is that Michael is actually from a financial background, and this is something we're working on right now, is improving that communication. So how do we present savings to the finance side of the business, for example? It's a different way of communicating, really, and it's different for every client and every prospect and everyone in the room, but we feel as though this is what we're now moving towards, solving these procurement business problems, I suppose is the best way to put it.
Right, thank you. And that's actually a very good point. My background is finance, so I do understand what some of the challenges are there. And I'm not going to really touch on that, but we can also have a conversation later. So conclusion, just a couple of things that I'd like you to take away from this, and I hope I've been able to explain that. But implementation makes the tool available. Again, that doesn't mean that it's successful. That's just the start, right? So adoption determines success. An adoption at supplier level, at buyer level, and at your stakeholders. But especially the buyer and the supplier level. That's really, really critical. Frequently communicate success. Frequently explain to the organization, what are you doing, why are we doing it, what is the strategicness of it, and constantly try to get that seat at the table. It's an important point. Single point of contact. So everybody within the organization knows where to go and what kind of information they will need to supply us in order for us to start doing RFPs, RFIs, etc. Avoid complexity. I've spoken with other people in procurement, and I know sometimes we have the tendency to turn it into rocket science. It's not. So try to make it simple. Try to make it relevant for your audience. Develop strategic roadmap with your eSourcing supplier. These are all in random order, very, very important. Iasta, you guys might use other companies for sure, but talk to these guys. I mean, they do this on a daily basis. They implement it. They know what the pitfalls are. They know how you can make mistakes, and they can help you to avoid those. Other things in here. yeah, that's really about it. So that's all I wanted to share with you. I did wanted to take questions, so I was trying to go through this PowerPoint relatively quickly because I typically prefer to engage with the audience in that way. So I'm welcome to answer any questions you might have. No, we are using e-auctions. We are doing, yeah, sorry. So we do standard reverse auctions typically. We also have done forward auctions. We've done sealed bids. We've done, I'm not a big fan of Dutch auctions, although I'm Dutch, which is it's kind of interesting. I'm not a big fan of that, but the tool will allow you to do all of that. So we are doing a lot of e-auctions. I think if I understand your question correctly is what kind of resistance have we had during our implementation? Well, it's the typical questions are, or resistances that you would see is people say, well, why do we need it? We already have the best suppliers in the market. We already know what we're doing. We don't need to engage with you. We already understand our business. And then if you explain to them, well, what we bring to the table, and in VF it was quite simple, is to say, well, you're making decisions for your brand. We need to do what's right for VF. And the brands were always the other way around. They were saying, I need to do what's right for my brand. And I keep saying, what's right for VF is right for the brands. And that's the mindset that I've been trying to get into everybody's brain. It's not very easy, but once you have a couple of successes, and I did get a lot of support from the senior management group, from our CEO and all the senior members there, which obviously helps. But then if you got a couple success stories, we saved 25% on shopping bags. We've saved 50% on lighting. If you have those kind of big numbers, then people will talk to you. Again, like I said, walking into a room with marketeers and talk about how would you like me to increase your budget by 20%, I mean, that immediately people start to listen. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Well, when we started, and this maybe goes more into our technological environment that we have in VF, we have a legacy system. It's AS400, which I'm not sure if that still means anything to the people in the room, but so very difficult information. We had no idea how much we were spending on energy. We had no idea. We kind of had a feel. Of course, we do budgets, but we really didn't know what the actual spend is on energy. Now we do with Spend Analytics. So what we did is we take downloads out of the Subledger AP, and we upload it into the Spend Analytics tool. We've classified all our supplies with UNSPSC coding. So we can now do consolidated reportings and say, well, how much do I spend on energy? How much do I spend on office supplies across Europe? And that then allows you to set up a sourcing pipeline, right? I mean, if you see you have a big spend with a lot of suppliers, then automatically that's the ones that you go after first. And that's what we did. So for office supplies, we had 25 suppliers. Now we have one, as an example. And we have many of those.
So spend consolidation.
Exactly, yeah. So it allows you to really easily go, okay, well, how much do I spend in a certain category? How does that break down by country? Which suppliers are that? And then talk about how strategic are those suppliers for us.
Just wanted to pick up on that point, actually. You talked about the consolidation piece, and what we're seeing in the marketplace is a movement solely down that route and more towards managing risk. So we've seen in the past where people have consolidated spend, but they're now realizing that there is quite an important dynamic on the risk side. So consolidating to one supplier is probably lower on down the list these days. So and risk is actually, we get searches online from the buying community, and those searches online, I would say 50% of them have the word risk in them. So it gives you an idea of what people are really thinking. Sorry, another question?
So we are with two. Melina sits there in the room, so we work together. As I said, we are the facilitator. So if I'll pick a brand. If the North Face wants to do a sourcing event for fixtures in the retail stores that we've done, then typically what we do is we set up the RFIs, we do the supply qualification, we check credibility, we do all the standard things that you do before you invite them. Then you start talking about sourcing strategy. Yeah, so are there suppliers that should be given a competitive advantage over others, and why? What is your lotting structure? You know, how are you going to set it up? When you talk about fixtures, you're talking about many different items. So are you going to do Excel bidding, or are you going to do or not? Or so there's a lot of things that you then do, but that's how we are structured. So we have a lot of buyers in the organization that make the ultimate decisions, and we will help them drive to the right end point. And we do that together. I will get another head in Lugano, where our international head office is. So I'll probably triple in headcount in 2 years' time. I don't think a lot of people can say that in the room, right? Does that answer your question? Yeah. I think we kind of do 2 upgrades a year. If we see opportunities to improve the system, then we do communicate them with Iasta. The beauty is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, is that you don't do any hard coding, right? You don't do anything specific for customers. So if there is an enhancement, it becomes available for everyone, which I think is a really big benefit. And I know there's other suppliers who do that differently. I mean, good examples. I mean, I used to work for Foot Locker, where we were also with Iasta, and so I've been working with Iasta for roughly 10 years now, and I've seen the tool develop from, you know, good to where it is today, and it's been a very exciting journey to see what the enhancements have been over time.
So it's cloud-based. It's out of the box. You cannot customize it yourself.
No. No, but there is a lot of communication back and forth. If we see something that we would like to see improved or included, then there is a lot of dialogue with Iasta on that. Well, when VF acquires brands, and again we've recently done that with the acquisition of Timberland, is we first get a lot of the things related to the supply chain migrated. So when you talk about, you know, where do they purchase their merchandise? Obviously, we are an apparel company from heritage, so that's a very straightforward one. But we are considered strategic. So that means that if we acquire a brand, we automatically have a seat at the table, and we started to engage with the person within Timberland. In this case, they have an equivalent of me. So we do talk to these guys, and they do understand that eSourcing is the tool to use. It is. I'm almost going to say eSourcing is mandatory within the company. It's not entirely true, but it is very much so. E-auction does not mean you need to stop communicating with potential suppliers. It doesn't mean I got the tool and I don't have to pick up the phone and talk to anybody. We do supplier training. We engage with them very, very much in terms of communication in emails or you know, it's not like e-sourcing replaces that. It just makes everything much more transparent. It makes everything much more easy to understand and clear. So, does that answer the question? Yeah. All right, like I said, you know, thank you again for being here. I think we're out of time. If you have any other questions, I will be at the Iasta stand, and I'll be more than happy to take them. All right.